Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to This is Constitutional with Bruce Jacobs. I'm a lawyer here in Miami. I practice foreclosure defense work. I fight banks in foreclosures and have been doing it for half of my career. Um, 25 years ago, I started as a prosecutor here in Miami, and now I'm prosecuting banks for systemic fraud on the court. And it's been quite a journey. We've had a lot of really interesting hearings lately. Things are getting to that point where it's finally coming together, and we're telling some stories. So this is our third show. The first show we introduced Ana Lazaro Rodriguez. She's a client you might read about in the Miami Herald or Telemundo, or we've been fighting for her. She spent 19 years in a women's prison in Cuba. She 60 years ago was fighting the Castro regime and got disappeared, as they call it. The same. She was doing the same thing we saw a couple of months ago in Cuba, where people were out there, fighting for freedom. And she came to the United States. She settled in Miami. She bought a house in the 90s. She paid her mortgage. She was living with two other prisoners. One prisoner was uh, spent 18 years in prison. Her name was Miriam. She's dying of Alzheimer's right now. She's 83 years old. She's 82. Ana Lazaro is 83. And the other prisoner that lived with her was dying of cancer, named Maria. And the unfortunate story is one that played out for people back in the heyday of Countrywide and Washington Mutual and all these subprime lenders, where she was Ana Lazaro was asked by her roommate Maria to take out a loan against the house with Countrywide so that they can get money to pay for Maria's health care. She was dying of cancer. And I think it's a sad state of affairs for the United States to be the wealthiest country in the world, and for people who die of cancer to have to go through all of their money and then try to get other people to cash out the equity of their homes in order to get treatment. I think we can do better as a society, but that's what happened. And Countrywide gave Miss Rodriguez a loan knowing she couldn't pay it back. And she was in her 70s at the time. She said, I don't make enough money to do this. How do I qualify? And Countrywide told her, don't worry, we'll get you qualified. And they did. They apparently faked the documents and got her a loan for nearly $500,000. Imagine you would lend someone who's in their 70s $500,000. Like, that doesn't make any sense. But it was a predatory loan. They were doing this to all communities of color. This is part of the fight that I think is most offensive is, this was the subprime loan strategy. Find people of color, find the elderly, find the people who are willing to sign their name, not understanding what they're getting into. And then when the loan goes into default, they have these provisions like negative amortization, whatever it was, that allows them to jump up the principal balance and make as much money as they can. And frankly, it was something that played out all over the country. Millions of homeowners lost everything because of it. Especially hardest hit were communities of color. And there were some settlements. Bank of America, JP Morgan Chase, a promise to stop doing that kind of stuff and didn't. But that is part of the journey that I got involved with, because I read about Anna's story in the Miami Herald a couple of years ago. And as soon as I saw her case and I looked at it, I was like, oh, that's fraud. There's Bank of America acting fraudulently. They're putting in a forged document, something that a signature they know is a forgery that they forged and kept secret from the government, that they were doing this all over the country, and other fake evidence, and then lied about it and destroyed evidence about it and did all kinds of things that none of us could ever do. And they got her house. They got Anna Maria's house by a fraudulent foreclosure. And Anna was here to talk about her story, which is still going on. We were just in the Miami Herald this week because we were in the middle of presenting our evidence that uh, there was fraud in the court in the foreclosure before the Honorable Peter Lopez, who's a very experienced judge who knows what's going on here, and it was a really interesting dynamic because what happened was that Bank of America came in and said, "Hey, we have a privilege to commit fraud." That was the argument. Bank of America has a privilege to commit fraud. And we're still fighting for Anna's case. We're gonna get into a little bit more, but I was just trying to summarize like where we stand because right now Anna is about to be evicted from her home during COVID. There are protections for every tenant from being evicted across the country, certainly in Miami where COVID is raging. There's protections for all the people who had federally backed mortgages, people with good credit, but all the people from communities of color, all the people who got these subprime loans, there's no protections for them. There's, the fight to survive. And last week we had Maria Williams James on the show, who is an African American retired school teacher. Her husband flew fighter pilot missions in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. Guy served his country, retired as a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force. And after he died, Miss Williams paid Bank of America on her mortgage religiously on a $51,000 mortgage in retirement. Imagine the little retired school teacher that goes every month to the bank, gets a cashier's check, pays her mortgage, keeps her receipts. And Bank of America put her in foreclosure fraudulently. They got a judgment of foreclosure fraudulently. And it wasn't until 2013 that a judge named Jennifer Bailey here in Miami vacated the judgment due to fraud because she paid her mortgage. And Bank of America didn't resolve the case. They just sold the loan and transferred servicing to a new servicer who started another foreclosure. And Miss Williams James was here talking about the heartache she went through, 11 years being in foreclosure. When she proved she paid her mortgage while she was in foreclosure, Bank of America was still taking her payments, $300 a month. And unfortunately, we have a judge who recused herself from all of my cases just a month ago, started recusing herself from all of my cases when I asked her nicely to please reconsider whether you're going to address the fraud in the court that's going on in this case. And the judge threatened me with contempt. She started to make ad hominem attacks against me. And then she recused herself from all my cases. Great. But even after accusing herself from my cases, she all of a sudden, even after we won the trial for Miss Williams James, because we proved that they couldn't prove that she was in default, the judge entered an order that reinstated the judgment she knew was vacated due to fraud. It's now a judicial qualifications complaint by the client because that is not constitutional. But let me tell you what is constitutional. What's happening for my client, Julie Nicolas, who's here with us today. Hi, Julie.
Hi, Mr. Franco.
Nice to see you.
Same here.
So Julie is a client of mine that I kind of came in kind of almost at the end of the whole process, right?
Yes, you did. Yes, you did.
And what happened was that Miss Nicolas had had worked with a colleague of mine who was from a very good firm, very respectable guy. I love him to death. He calls me up on a Friday. You got to help my old client here. She needs some help. She's in foreclosure. See what you could do. And I called her up and I was like, it's Friday night, right? It's almost Shabbat. Like yes. I'm sorry, I won't be able to do anything until after Shabbat, but I'll be there. We'll figure it out. Yes. And at that time, like what was going on for you? Like, why don't you tell us a little bit first off, start off by telling us who you are and how you got into this whole mess.
Well, my name is Julie Nicolas, and I've been in my home for a few years, and then I just started having foreclosure problems, and I just kept fighting, and I would go to the courthouse and put papers in and just keep fighting. I just knew something wasn't right because I was making payments as well, and they kept changing. It's almost like when I'm making payments, they would transfer my mortgage, my loan, to another mortgager, and then they will start another process again. Oh, and it's like it kept going and kept going.
So let me try to jump in because it's funny. I talk to these clients over the years, and I to hear them describe it, and then to understand what's actually going on for them is sometimes to me it's just surprising. So you took out a loan with Countrywide, right?
Yes,
And were you paying your loan fine
I
for
was
years,
paying my loan fine,
right?
and
And
then
what happened? Why'd you stop paying
they
your
just
loans?
told me that my mortgage is being transferred to somebody
Well,
else.
hold on. Like, wasn't there a time where you were having that? What do you do for a living,
I am a nurse.
right? And you
I
were
work
you.
for agencies. I used to work in a hospital, and I stopped. And
So let's talk first off. What hospital did you work at?
I worked at Jackson for a good
Jackson
19
Memorial,
years.
right? You
Yes, Jackson Memorial
you're
Hospital.
a union member,
Union member would ask me. Union,
right?
yes.
And how long did you work for Jackson as a union
About
member?
19 years, and I was in the union for about that long as well.
Right. And working for Jackson, you were what in the maternity ward? You were
I
telling me.
worked in Holt's Children's Hospital, women's maternity, labor and delivery,
So you
and I
got to be
worked.
around all the babies.
Oh, I got to be around the babies when the mothers come in
Oh,
and triage. We did that, and then I also got to work in the OR. I did a few C-sections, circulate with the doctors, and then I also did recovery after the mom
so you're like a
deliver.
full on like
Full
licensed
on,
nurse,
full on.
right?
I work with midwife. I got to sometimes assist the midwife to cut the cord, and I've
So
done everything. I take them right out. Right
I
after
have
they come out, I would be the one to stimulate them, make them cry.
I love it. I'll tell you, I
Yeah,
have 4 kids, and my wife, we were working with midwives, and there was a whole plan to have natural childbirth, and
yes,
God gave us 4 healthy kids, but made it all be by C-section.
right.
And the nurses we were at a different hospital at North Shore, but the nurses made such a difference. Like they really
Yes,
like made the whole experience memorable because they were the ones that were like, no, 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 don't hold
yeah,
it like,
we
do it like
good.
this,
Yeah.
and just giving, this is how you swaddle them.
Oh
Are
yeah.
you a good swaddler?
Oh yes, I am.
Masterful, I
I
imagine.
am.
So you're working when did you buy this house?
I bought my house in 1993. I
So
was pregnant.
so you and how many kids you have now?
I have three kids. There three was born, but one I have two now.
So you raised 3 kids in the
Three
house
kids
though?
in the house. Three kids in the house.
And were you a single mom? You married? What was
I
this?
was married, and then at one time, I got divorced.
So
But now I'm
mostly as a
single.
single mom?
I'm a single. But the kids were very young. Like
Right.
my oldest son was like 15.
So you have 3 kids in this house, and
Mm-hmm.
were you paying the mortgage?
Paying my mortgage, doing everything right. My insurance, everything was on
Okay.
point.
And I understand there was something that happened with you were working at a health agency.
Yeah, and then I stopped the hospital, and then I went into agency.
So when you're working for an agency as a nurse,
Mm-hmm.
a home health agency, that means they're assigning you to different people's
Clients.
clients that you're going to their house to provide them
Right,
nursing care,
right.
right? And I understood that there was a problem at the company.
Yeah, there was one company, actually the first company I started working for after I left Jackson, and the company got audited, and I didn't get any payment 3 months. So I worked and didn't receive any payment. And right around that same time, I got another foreclosure from that time, and I say, just give me a little time. The money's coming in. And by the time the money started coming in, so I sent in two payments to catch up because they gave us, paid us a little more advance. So I was sending, two payments to catch up. Then they just shipped me to another company again. In the middle of that, me paying my payments, I got transferred to another mortgage company.
So
And then it's like the process started again.
so let me make sure because I want to make sure that the viewers understand what we're dealing with here. What I know happened across the boards, like nationally,
Mm-hmm.
was you have these banks, these Bank of America, Countrywide, or whatever the servicer is, that are supposed to be helping you
Mm-hmm.
get back into a place where you're paying your mortgage as agreed, right? Your
Yes.
performing loan. And what I know is that a lot of these people around the country were having problems and were told, well, if you want us to help, you got to stop paying your mortgage for at least 3 months so that we can give you a modification. Now, you were not, you didn't pay because you had your company stop giving you payroll for 3 months, right?
Right.
But when you finished the 3 months, you started getting money back. I understand you were going through the same modification process that all those other people were going through.
Yes, absolutely.
So, talk a little bit about what that was like. What do you have to do to modify your loan?
For them to modify my loan, it was you will send all the information, you get a packet in the mail, and then you fill out all the information, and you have to make sure everything is on point because you don't want to get kicked out your house. So I would fill out all my paperwork, make sure everything is dotted and everything is correct. I would send it in, and then I'm waiting for them to send me some results back. Normally I don't get a result back, so I would keep calling them. Some of the representative were like, why you keep calling, why you keep calling? I said, I'm just making sure that you guys receive all the information and what they receive. And say, oh yeah, we received it. And some of them will say, yeah, we received it. But then when you're waiting for a settlement from the modification, I never got one.
So, let me ask you, like, how long did it take you to put together a package?
A packet, I can sit all day or 2 days. I could give myself 2 days because I have to get copies of all my receipts. I have to go online, print everything out, fill out the paperwork.
It's like a budget,
it's
right?
it's
And
like a
all your,
budget. You fill it out, and then you got to put out all your bank statement, all your three months of bank statement. Normally they ask for 3 months,
right.
so you have to download all of that, make copies of it, sign them, put their loan number on the top, and then sign it at the bottom, and then fax it back over to them.
And what I know is that at the time that this was going down, banks were routinely losing your paperwork. Oh, we don't
Mm-hmm.
have it. It's amazing.
Yeah.
They can track every single loan to the penny,
Yeah.
except for they can't track the package that was faxed to them.
Yeah.
Like they have electronic filing just like we do.
Hmm.
But what I know is that they were stringing people along. They were just like there's a case that I am using when in your case now. There's a federal judge in California that hit Bank of America for $45 million punitive damage award. And what he said was that, Bank of America had this Kafka-esque loan modification process. Kafka-esque means really bad. Like that's not fair
Wow.
what they're doing. And what was happening is that, you would fill out your application. They would tell you they lost it. You'd refile another application. They'd tell you they lost that. They'd tell you have to make temporary modification payments for thousands of dollars every
Mm-hmm.
month.
Mm-hmm.
You'd make your payments, and then they'd transfer your servicing to some other servicer who would say, okay, we got to start all over again.
Absolutely. This is exactly what I was going through. And I kept doing that over and over. And then I would get a new attorney to look over the case. And then the same thing was going. Like the attorney would even try to get on the phone, and they said, no, she can't make a payment until the loan modification comes through. And even with that, they transferred it again in the middle of that problem. And it kept going and going to the point where by the time I got you, they were putting my house for auction.
Right. Like when what I find amazing is, we're about to go into another crisis.
Yeah.
A foreclosure crisis is literally
Yeah.
the wave is cresting. It is about to hit land.
Hmm.
And people are sitting there recognizing like when this moratorium, eviction, whatever is finally up and running and off, and people are just getting thrown out, they're going to evict millions of homeowners all over the country. And it's going to be using the same evidence they used in your case.
Hmm.
And what I find to be offensive is that, as a society, we can't come up with a better strategy now that people are going to lose their homes because of COVID, that, we can't figure out a way that these trillion-dollar companies can work with the people and make them leave people in their homes during this pandemic and find a different solution other than let's evict them and then we can buy up the houses with our Wall Street REITs and rent them out to all the people who just got foreclosed on, which is going to create even worse income inequality than we've seen over the last. I mean, it just keeps getting worse and worse. And it's because I think the government is kind of, they're not promoting the general welfare, which
No, they're
is,
not.
which is really what this is constitutional is all about, the preamble of the Constitution. I don't know if you guys have that like somewhere in a video, in a picture, but the preamble of the Constitution says that the purpose of government is to establish justice.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you're like you were getting justice from
I
Bank of
was not
America?
getting justice. They did not want to hear my story.
It was supposed to ensure domestic tranquility.
That wasn't happening.
People are freaking out.
Yes, they were.
It's supposed to provide for the common defense, and it's supposed to promote the general welfare. That's what the Constitution says the government's supposed to do. And meanwhile, it seems like all we're doing is figuring out how to make the stock market go up higher and how to make Wall Street bankers richer. And I, frankly, I'm one of those guys that's like John Hancock. That guy signed the Declaration of Independence extra, extra large. Why? Because he wanted the King of England, who was that small segment of the population with all the money and power that lived by a different set of laws many, many, many years ago. He wanted the King of England to know that he was done. And even if it meant his life, he was going to fight for freedom. And, I almost wonder, like, what is it going to take to make the government behave that way again, like fighting for the individual freedoms of the people, as opposed for a system that is making a very small segment of the population have all the money and power and let them live by a different set of laws. Do you think, let me ask you, have you ever been in litigation besides your house?
No.
You ever had a lawsuit?
No, I never.
What do you think would happen to you if you walked into court and you presented fake evidence and lied to the judge?
Oh, that's not good.
Right?
That's
You'd
not good
be in a lot of trouble.
Oh, yes, you would.
Right? But meanwhile, you have Bank of America. You know what Bank of America's defense is to this? We have a privilege. They literally told that to Judge Lopez, who hasn't done anything yet to them. We're going to find out whether they're right. But that's their argument. They have a privilege to do this. Talk about privilege, like white privilege. I guess this is bank privilege. Is that better than white privilege? I don't know. We're going to find out.
This is not a good thing. I don't think so.
To me, what I think is just honest about your story is, have you been gainfully employed ever since that 3-month gap?
Oh, yeah. Even with the gap, I was still working.
They just owed you money.
They just owed me money.
And they paid you the money.
And they paid me.
And you gave
took
that
me a while.
You've given thousands and thousands of dollars to Bank of America to try to get them to let you just go back to normal. Right?
Right.
And this is not an unusual circumstance. You are one of millions of people around the country, most of whom lost their homes already. And not, to me, like, what I find most offensive about all this is this whole time that they were telling you no, right? They're telling you, we're going to take your house by the foreclosure, right?
Yeah.
Did you know before I got involved that they were engaged in this like systemic fraud on the court?
No, I had no clue.
Did your lawyers ever?
Well, none of the other lawyer never took you took a step that when I spoke to you, you told me, don't worry. It sounds like I've heard this type of story before. You gave me hope. And it's like, we're going to take care of this. Nobody never told me about, I can have a little hope or you're going to take care of it. It was almost, okay, we'll send the paperwork. And let me tell you, you just gave me hope. That's all I can say.
So I think that if someone's going to come into court, I was a prosecutor, right? And as a criminal prosecutor, my job was to make sure that justice was done.
Right.
And I could see in my career, there were bad guys that needed to be prosecuted because they're bad people. A lot of people were charged with really bad crimes that were not so bad, but, did dumb things. And I think that there's a difference between that. And for me, it was always like, look, the great equalizer is if you don't want to, if I can't work it out with you, we'll go to trial. And to me, the idea that you would go to trial knowing that your cops were lying was just, it was foreign. Like that would never be something that I would ever participate in. I
Right.
just couldn't.
Right.
But now we have these banks who have an army of lawyers, all of whom are willing to go to the wall with it, and they're out there prosecuting these foreclosure cases. And I just want to make sure it's clear. It's not like I'm the first one that figured out that there's fraud in foreclosures. A decade ago, the FBI investigated the robo-signing scandal, said there were millions of false and fictitious documents corrupting the foreclosures across the country. The Office of the Controller of the Currency, the OCC, was like the federal regulators. Imagine like your mom tells you, all right, you're busted. Stop. I want you to identify every case you did that in, because I know that you're filing these cases without properly endorsed notes, and I know you're filing these cases with false assignments. And they just start forging endorsements, like felony forgery en masse, like within days of the OCC saying you should not do that. And then while they're doing all this fraud, the federal government, the U.S. Attorney's Office, the Department of Justice enters into a settlement agreement that says you promise to stop committing fraud and foreclosures. We're going to make you pay $25 billion. And the crazy thing is that they were still committing fraud and foreclosures as they're signing those documents. And it's, to me, like, imagine if you were a drug dealer and they busted you and you entered into a plea negotiation with the government that said you're getting, just a fine, but stop doing the drug dealing. And they found out that you were still doing drug dealing, and worse, like now you're into like racketeering and all kinds of other, serious crimes. The government would be coming hard against you. You had just gotten a judgment entered against you.
Oh my goodness.
Right?
I was devastated.
And I thought it was miraculous. Like, I'm one of these spiritual people. I believe that everything happens at its perfect time. And when my friend called me, I was like, this guy is a good guy. I'm going to help you. We're going to make it all work out. And I remember like when we spoke on like Sunday or Monday or whatever it was, and I told you, like, look, I'm just telling you that right now you're in front of a judge named Beatrice Butchko.
Right.
All right. And Judge Butchko has been on the bench for a long, long time.
Right.
And this is not the first time she's held banks accountable. Like, what I love about Judge Butchko is she's a hardcore Republican, right? Like pictures of Ronald Reagan in her office. Like, and what I've seen from her over the years has been, she's always said, look, foreclosures are just like any other case. And there have been multiple times now where we go to trial and I prove that there's fraud, and all right, the fraud in my courtroom is not allowed. And she starts criminal contempt proceedings. And unfortunately, the times that she's done it, the appellate court here in Miami every time comes up with some reason to shut it down.
Wow.
And that is not because there's not fraud.
Right.
It's because the Third District Court of Appeals decided to shut it down. So what happens now is that I go in front of Judge Butchko and I file this emergency motion to vacate judgment due to fraud. And I lay out a very extensive argument with all this law that says, and facts and evidence and depositions and documents and screenshots and whatever it is, to show that in your case, the evidence was fraudulent.
Yes.
And not just fraudulent in like your case. This was a systemic fraud that they put in motion. Bank of America, JP Morgan Chase did the same thing in order to take people's homes throughout this entire crisis.
Right.
And what I loved about Judge Butchko was she was like, all right, let's have a hearing.
Yes.
And I remember calling you like, oh my God, we got a hearing, which was the start of it, right?
Yes, it was.
And how did that feel for you? Like when you started to see that start to unwind?
I didn't know what to expect because I never been to court, things like that concerning the house. But the fact that you told me we're going to work with this, we're going to work with it. I was just listening. I was listening to everything that was going on. And come to find out, I think after the first day, the judge, Bushko, already figured. She already saw the steps that the Bank of America had a lot of things that were not positive.
So here's what happened, just so we can kind of play it out there. Judge Butchko says, all right, I want you to brief everything. Everyone's going to file their briefs explaining their positions. And Bank America has, or Bank of New York Mellon actually is, it's all a shell game. Bank of New York Mellon is the trustee. Bank of America is the master servicer, and they have a sub servicer named Carrington, and they're all being represented. They're like nesting dolls of. They all represent the investors who own the loan. And what happens is that Judge Busco says, "Let's have a hearing." And the lawyer, this Ackerman partner, this guy Ackerman's like a huge, like AM 200 law firm, like one of the biggest firms in Florida. Mm-hmm. And this partner from the financial services department basically comes in and makes this whole argument that I'm like, wait a second, Judge. Now that we know what their position is, let me tell you what my position is. The endorsement they're relying on, it's a fraud. The assignment they're relying on, that's fraud too. The mortgage loan schedule they're relying on, that's fraud too. The testimony they're giving about the loan boarding process, checking the records for accuracy, that's perjury, that's a fraud. And they're also trying to pretend like Bank of America is not involved in this loan. That's a fraud too. Right? So we have 5 fraudulent areas that we're working on. And we're saying that she should vacate the judgment due to fraud. And those are the issues. And Judge Butchko, to her credit, was like, was just going to play it straight. Both sides. I got to prove my case. You got to prove her case. We're going to follow the rules of evidence. We're going to do this. And we had an expert, a guy named Jay Patterson, who is a certified fraud examiner out of Little Rock, Arkansas, who is just, one of my, I've been doing this work since 2008. And Jay Patterson is one of the experts I met in 2010 when I started working with Max Gardner, who is the general. Like Max Gardner has an army of us lawyers who fight banks, and he's been having seminars for years with us. But Jay Patterson came in and gave all this testimony that was like, now the judge could see the endorsement was a fraud, the assignment was a fraud, the mortgage loan schedule was a fraud, the testimony about the boarding process is a fraud, and Bank of America is the master servicer. They're claiming that it's not. That's a fraud. So Bank of America's whole, or the partner at Ackerman, his whole plan was, well, I'm going to stop all the Bank of America evidence from coming in. How am I going to do that? By denying that Bank of America has anything to do with the loan anymore. Right. And it was, to me, like, all right, judge is like, I'm going to sustain the objection. That's, I see what he's saying. Go. What's your next plan? I'm like, fine, let me call Bank of New York Mellon to the stand because I subpoenaed them. Yeah. And they show up with this like witness from the sub-servicer Carrington. Yeah. And the witness is like, Bank of America sold the master servicing rights to Carrington in 2016. Really? How do you know that? Well, I spoke to the lawyers and I looked at some documents. Where are those documents? You know what those documents are? You have any knowledge about those documents? Well, I don't really remember. And I don't really know. And it was like, it just went on and on for like about 10 minutes. Because I love, like, when I get to cross-examine a witness that I know is not telling the truth, like, it is fun for me. I've had some Perry Mason moments in my career where, like, you get them to be like, okay, I'm sorry. But, like, this was one of those moments where I was like, she's totally lying. Like, watch this, Judge. And actually what happened was Judge Butchko was like, that's it. That's enough. Yeah. I'm stopping this hearing. This is a waste of time, is what she said. This is a waste of time to listen to this witness. Yeah. And she ordered Bank of America and Bank of New York Mellon to sit for a deposition within 2 weeks. Yeah. They had to come by court order and let me ask them about, is the endorsement a forgery? Is the assignment a forgery? Is the mortgage loan schedule fake? What about this loan boarding testimony? Is that perjury? And tell me about Bank of America and whether they're the master servicer. And what I was shocked and amazed by, well, not really shocked anymore, but what I thought was really problematic is they just blew off her order. Yeah. They didn't show up, and we're sitting there and we're all filing all these motions and back and forth and everyone, and they just didn't show up. And what we did was Jay Patterson, who's an amazing expert, was doing his own investigation, and he went to check with like Moody's, and which is like the rating agencies. They were like, Bank of America is the master servicer. Yeah. And then she went and checked with Bank of New York Mellon's website and found the agreements that show Bank of America is the master servicer. Right. So we served that all on Judge Butchko, and to her credit, she was like, "Oh, you lied to me." Yeah, criminal contempt proceedings just for perjury. Wow. And I'll tell you, she laid up Bank of America, Bank of New York Mellon, Carrington, and the lawyer, Nathaniel Callahan from Ackerman, were all ordered to appear for a criminal arraignment
Yes.
on criminal contempt proceedings. It
Yes.
was spectacular. Thank God,
Yes.
because you shouldn't be allowed to walk into a courtroom and lie. You
Lie.
probably would not lie to a judge to their
I
face.
would not.
Right?
I would not.
But what was the most amazing part to me was, like, you would think that they would be like, okay, let's just resolve this case. We'll let Miss Nicolas go on her way and that'll be the end of it. They've never once said anything about, we want to let you keep your house, right?
Right. No, they never said that.
They're still trying to get you. They have your judgment.
Yes.
Matter of fact, your house was sold, right? There was.
Yes, they sold it regardless of
Right. So now we're going to unwind all that eventually, God willing. But, what's interesting to me is that you have a situation where Judge Butchko starts these criminal contempt proceedings. It makes the front page of the Daily Business Review. Like, this is some serious stuff. And all four of those parties, the lawyer, the subservicer, the master servicer, and Bank of America, and the trustee, Bank of New York Mellon, each file their own independent emergency Third District Court of Appeals. Wow. Please protect us from Judge Butchko. We are, don't let her go forward with these contempt proceedings. Wow. And I've always been amazed, because to me, I would think as an appellate court judge that if someone comes up and says, I think that you should stop this judge from going forward on contempt proceedings, that's not really something for an appellate court to get involved in. Judge wants to issue contempt proceedings, let the judge do it. And at the end of it, if the judge is wrong, you'll appeal him, and now we'll figure it out. Like, that's what the appellate courts are not supposed to be jumping in that early. But what happened here was, originally, of the four appeals, the first one was from the subservicer, Carrington, and the appellate court said, we're not stopping anything. You can go forward with your hearings. And we had set up a contempt hearing or motion for criminal contempt for defying the order to come in for the depot against Bank of America and Bank of New York Mellon. We had set up a request for a second contempt order that says everything, because they defied the order to come in, everything's now deemed admitted, which means that there's systemic fraud, which means that you can now issue your second contempt order for the real fraud, not just for lying about the fraud. And, we were moving forward towards, a final, a hearing that would have blown the whole thing up. And then Ackerman files a emergency petition on behalf of Mr. Callahan. And I was shocked when I read it. Now, many of you know I have been personally defending myself from a bar complaint that happened 3 years ago, because I was accused of lack of candor, which means I didn't tell the court about the facts and the law, which is a serious offense. Thank God I was found not guilty of that. Okay. But they also accused me of impugning the integrity of the Third District Court of Appeals and a trial level judge. That I never really fought I didn't say well, it's true at all. I just said, I'm sorry, and I'll not do that anymore, and please forgive me, and did all this stuff to try to get the bar to leave me alone. And, but you can lose. I mean, I'm right now, the bar is trying to take my license for 2 years because I impugn the integrity of a judge, which is all I've been, all that I was found to be guilty of. But meanwhile, Ackerman, I call them the sacred cows of Ackerman's appellate financial services practice, filed this appeal. And what they said was that the Third District Court of Appeals should, quote, urgently hold Judge Butchko accountable, unquote, because she falsely accused the Ackerman partner of perjury without any factual basis and without any due process, which was, can I say batshit? I can say that. I can say that. Yeah. Totally batshit crazy. Like, you cannot. I didn't think you could
do that and say that to the judge after you presented the information to her.
It was perjury. They totally lied. We had the contract. We had the evidence from their own website. Yes. But what was crazy was that the reason why they claimed that Judge Butchko would rubber stamp an order she knew was false to destroy the career of this partner at Ackerman. You want to turn that off? Like they were literally like demanding the Third District Court of Appeals vindicate poor Mr. Callahan, who's been falsely accused of, misconduct without a factual basis. And the reason why they said that Judge Butchko would have rubber stamped is the word they use, rubber stamped that order, starting criminal contempt proceedings, is apparently I, Bruce Jacobs, have some improper and quote special influence, unquote, over Judge Butchko. She's in my pocket. She's at my beck and call. Wow. I call Judge Butchko and I say, hey, I want you to put in an order that says my friend here, who I don't like, this lawyer I'm up against. Is that
even possible?
I mean, let me say this. If Judge Butchko did that, she should be removed from the bench and disbarred because that is not acceptable. But she didn't do that. She followed the law. She did exactly what she's supposed to do. And something that she's done every time someone comes, there was a Bills and Sundberg, it's another huge law firm here in Miami. She did a multi-day evidentiary hearing. She had a lawyer, evidence that the lawyer from Bills and Sundberg wiretapped the opposing counsel in the case. Recorded them without their permission, which is a felony, and then used the information to smear the lawyer. Wow. She wrote a 51-page opinion explaining all of this and how they lied to her, how the Bills and lawyers lied to her in the evidentiary hearing. Wow. And for whatever reason, the Third District Court of Appeals said, well, since you found that these lawyers were lying, that means you're not fair and impartial, and you have to be disqualified. And Judge Butchko made the front page of the paper for being disqualified. Wow. Not for catching this lawyer committing a felony of wiretapping of opposing counsel and using it to smear the other lawyer and lying to the judge about it. Wow. And I don't think anything really happened to Bills and Sundberg after that, but that's, part of the journey we're on here. Right. But, Judge Butchko, to her credit, stood her ground. Mm-hmm. These guys totally falsely accused her. Mm-hmm. And, everything's kind of been stopped in your case now. I think at the end of the month, we have a couple more weeks until we have to file like our formal response. Okay. But, my plan now is, I believe, so 10 years ago when we had the robo-signing scandal going on, this is the timeline. March 29th, 2011, Bank of America signs that OCC consent order on the fraudulent foreclosures. Wow. March 30th, 2011, the Fourth District Court of Appeals, the appellate court for Broward and Palm Beach, certifies a question of great public importance to the Florida Supreme Court. It says there are many, many suspect documents in foreclosures. Wow. And it would radically affect the foreclosure crisis unfolding in the state, particularly because the lawyers are saying that this means that the banks cannot enforce they're not entitled to equitable relief if they're committing fraud. Wow. And what I believe is that we're seeing that again today, a decade later. There's many, many suspect documents in foreclosures.
That is really crazy.
And what I'll say is this, like, I don't know, I can't guarantee anything, Ms. Nicolas, and what's going to happen to you or what's going to happen to Ms. Williams-James, who paid her mortgage and had a judge reinstate a judgment that was vacated due to fraud after she recused herself from all of my cases, except for that one, and after we won the trial. There's some weird stuff that's happening right now. But we have this Ana Lazo Rodriguez case is, it's coming up right behind you because the same Bank of New York Mellon and Bank of America walked into Judge Lopez's courtroom. And we did the evidentiary hearing. You know what they said when I asked them what happened? What's Bank of America's relationship to Bank of New York Mellon? Nothing. We sold our servicing rights to SLS, the servicer, years ago. And this was after I already presented the recorded powers of attorney that show that Bank of America is the master servicer and SLS is the subservicer. Wow. So all of this is coming together at a time where, I think we might be able to do some real good in the world. Like as a nurse, like what's your take on this whole COVID crisis?
Um, this is a hard time for a lot of people.
Right?
A lot of people are having a hard time.
And is this the time to start putting people out on the street?
Oh no, this is not the time to start putting the mental. I mean, I have friends that are psychologists, and the impact not only of people dying and not working, but mentally, people are really going through a lot mentally.
And when people are going through too much mentally,
Oh
what you have is a breakdown in domestic tranquility.
yes,
Right?
absolutely.
That's exactly what we're facing right now.
Right.
And I believe that, I haven't really told many people about this yet, but so in Hawaii, the Supreme Court of Hawaii has already ruled twice against Bank of America, saying exactly the fraud that's happening that I have evidence of. That's wrongful, deceptive, and unfair what they're doing. Twice the Supreme Court of Hawaii has ruled that.
Wow.
And the Ninth Circuit, which deals with Hawaii, which covers Hawaii, has already said, well, if a corporation and their lawyers are engaged in systemic fraud on the court around the country, that's mail fraud, wire fraud, and obstruction of justice, and there's no privilege to commit RICO. That's RICO. That's racketeering.
Right.
So I just got there was a resolution passed by the county of Maui, the council for the county of Maui, passed a resolution because they're in Maui in Hawaii. They've been fighting Bank of America for decades. It all started with Bank of America was basically in Hawaii redlining all the Native Hawaiians. Like you couldn't get a loan from Bank of America if you were a Native Hawaiian.
They're doing this all over.
Straight up racism.
Wow.
Right. And even after they got caught, and they made a commitment to the same OCC guys that they promised to, identify all the cases that this fraud was going on back in 2011. Even though they made that commitment, they never honored it. They were supposed to give $150 million in special loans to the Native Hawaiians. I think they gave out $3 million worth in the first 4 years that they had to do it. And what's happened now is for 25 years, these guys in Hawaii have been fighting Bank of America. And now the council just voted to have their special counsel, who is a former Hawaii attorney general, that was supposed to be helping them prosecute Bank of America, hold them accountable for the fraudulent foreclosures that are still happening out there, and the Hawaiian commitment for the $150 million in loans. And they just passed a resolution asking for their counsel to work with me.
Oh.
And I have a team that I'm putting together. We might have an unnamed former major crimes prosecutor joining my elite legal team of badasses who are ready to fight with Bank of America and take them to town.
That's wonderful.
And I think that this is a class action RICO lawsuit.
Wow.
I think that we're going to be able to bring Bank of America to the table. And look, at the end of the day, I think if we all think about where we stand in the world, if we haven't realized it, there's a small segment of the population with all the money and power that's figured out how to divide us up between red and blue, so we can't even talk to each other anymore.
Right.
And they're walking away with all the money, and we're all struggling and going through COVID with this nightmare.
Yeah.
And wouldn't it be awesome if we could say, hey, these banks that were too big to fail a decade ago when they only had $3 trillion between Chase and Bank of America, now they have $6 trillion in assets. Maybe we should break them up. Maybe they should be broken up because they're dangerous to democracy. Maybe we should break them up because they are hurting the American people.
Yes, they are.
And wouldn't it be amazing if we could redirect the profit streams from those companies into, we have the city of Miami passed this foreclosure sanctions affordable housing trust fund, which was designed to take money from any sanctions awards we get and put it towards building affordable housing throughout Florida. We could use a few $1 billion for that.
Yes.
We might actually, solve some problems in the world, and we could establish justice. We could ensure domestic tranquility.
Yes.
Provide for the common defense against the banks, and and promote the general welfare.
Yes.
So, this is constitutional.
Sounds good.
That's the goal.
Yes.
So, I want to thank you, Ms. Nicolas, Julie, for coming on the show. It's been
thank you
really an honor to be representing you
Thank
in
you.
this fight, because I believe that this is a soul level. This is an energy like that. Your soul
Mm-hmm.
has probably been fighting for thousands and thousands of
Yes.
generations too.
Right.
And we probably have been fighting together, against a common enemy
Yeah.
before. This is not the
Yes.
first time we met, I don't believe.
I.
And it feels like there's something very special about what's happening
Thank
right
you.
now.
Thank you.
And I wish you the best. I pray that we are able to bring you justice and save your home, and
Thank you.
hopefully hold the banks accountable, and make the world a better place.
Yes, I truly believe that, and I thank you for accepting to take my case, and you're helping me think about all the other people you're going to help right now.
I mean,
I
God willing, we're going
really
to help a lot of
appreciate
people.
you. You're doing a lot of work. Um, all I can say is thank you so much for
Well,
accepting my case and
I am.
having me to come this far.
I'll tell you that we got this far because of a miracle, and that miracle is Judge Butchko. Like and
Thank you.
just because she's willing to follow the law to the letter without any fear, and which is what you want. You want a judge who's going to say, "I don't care who, if it's the most powerful against
Mm-hmm.
the weakest in the world."
Right,
That's all the more so when you should be stepping up as a judge to make
right.
sure that everyone's held to the same law,
Yes,
and that
everybody.
everyone plays by the same rules. And you
Yes,
catch someone cheating, you call them
yes.
out for it and hold them
Appreciate that.
accountable.
Yes, I really appreciate that.
All right, amen.
Thank you.
Well, look, this is Constitution with Bruce Jacobs. We will probably be back next week with more updates on the fight and the war. Please go to the website jakelegal.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and we have all the social media. We're in a fight. It's going to be a big fight brewing very, very quickly. So thank you for watching, and we look forward to seeing you soon.